We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of 11th House Radio. I'm Robert Phoenix, and I am here with you today in the midst of two major and significant astrological occurrences. We have the new moon in Virgo, obviously, and we are also right in the thick of the Mars-Saturn conjunction in the sign of Scorpio. And we're going to get into that today. We're going to get into conjunctions in general a little bit later, and talk about their significance in the chart and why you need to pay attention to them, both in terms of your chart and in terms of the chart that you might share with another person. It's a powerful aspect and one that's often overlooked. It's a very basic one, but we're going to get into it. Sometimes the simplest and most basic elements can be the most powerful in many ways. It doesn't always have to be convoluted, complex, and esoteric to do the trick. So we're going to get into conjunctions a little bit later. In the meantime, we're going to look at today's stars, and then we're going to transition into what's happening out there in the world. So that said, let's do this. We have the sun is at 2 degrees Virgo, the moon at 3 degrees Virgo. Now this is based on UTGMT time, so it's probably, the moon is probably closer to about 1 to 2 degrees, so we're really right now in the sweet spot for this sun-new moon conjunction, which always happens at the beginning of a sign. It's always going to happen at the beginning of the sign, and 2 weeks out now we're going to get into the opposite of this sign, which will be Pisces. The moon will be full in Pisces, and we'll talk about that. Mercury is in Virgo as well at 17 degrees, so we have a stellium of planets in Virgo. Thank God Venus is in Leo, because if it wasn't, we'd all be scrambling for something to soothe our nerves. I love Virgo. I am a Virgo. I have a couple of planets in Virgo. Pluto's in Virgo. Sun is in Virgo. My midheaven is in Virgo. My true node is in Virgo, conjunct my midheaven, so I've got a lot of real estate in Virgo. But it is a nervous sign, and it's a sign that is generally looking to somehow manage chaos. And I think that in my work, that's what I try to do. I try to look at the chaos of the world, and not all chaos is good, and not all chaos is bad. Sometimes chaos is a really interesting thing. You know, one of our greatest art forms, jazz, is built on chaos. You know, when we get into I love to talk about jazz. As a metaphor, when you get into the breakdown of a song, you know, when you get into the free form part of improvisation and creation, there's a chaotic sort of moment in time that takes place. People are exploring, they're playing, they're They're finding things inside the song, and sometimes it can be very dynamic, and sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes your life is chaotic, and those pieces of chaos can be parts of change, very interesting and important parts and components of change. So we don't always want to throw chaos out the window because it's interesting. Chaos is the crackling energy of creation. One of the things that's going on in the world at a much higher level is that they're taking chaos and broadcasting this globally because they, in quotes, want to have a state of chaos, a permanent state of chaos. Because when there's a permanent state of chaos, nothing stays fixed, nothing stays stable. So the elements of change are always in the air. They're always out there. They're always available to be tapped into as, number one, an energy, and number two, as a possibility. So if we just go across the globe right now, let's do just a check-in across the planet. Let's look at the hot spots. We have Ukraine, chaos. Utter chaos on both sides. You have guys that are in the Ukrainian army who've been conscripted, who don't want to fight. Some of them have tried to go to Russia to defect because they're being forced to fight against other people. The Russians have turned them back. So, and yet the Ukrainians have to mount this front in some ways so they can take on the eastern Ukrainians and the rebels as they're being defined. And so there's chaos. And, what's Russia's role? Where is Putin? A lot of the pro-Putin people are down on Putin because he hasn't stood up and, stuck a wing-toed boot up the ass of the Ukrainians. And Porky, as his name is, the chocolate king, the chocolate baron of Ukraine, the Willy Wonka of Ukraine. Putin hasn't stuck his foot up his ass, so people are down on Putin, and there's chaos there. Oh, Putin, he's the guy that's supposed to be standing up for the rights of the world, the morality of the world, and he's letting this whole thing happen. Well, there's some truth to that, but there's a much bigger play that's getting played out. So there's chaos. There's chaos on all sides there. So that's just one big, fat slice of chaos. Let's go south a little bit. Let's go towards Turkey, and on the other side of Turkey, we have Syria, and then there's northern Iraq, and we have ISIS and ISIL. Talk about chaos. Are you kidding me? That is chaos supreme. You've got this guy, the head of ISIS, who's running around theoretically beheading Americans. Well, let's be clear about that. Did we ever see any real... Look, if I'm beheading somebody, I'm not using a potato peeler to behead him. There are pictures of these guillotines that have been ordered, I think, by the Department of Homeland Security. These things are very sophisticated. They've got sharp blades and weights. They look like they just came right out of the gym, by the way. They look like gym equipment. The lone exception is instead of it being a lat or a pull-down bar, it's a guillotine blade. If you're going to cut somebody's head off, let's really make a show of it. Not this highly polished, high sound quality production with a guy with a potato peeler. And that's a whole other thing, right? But it's chaos nonetheless. That's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with chaos here. ISIS, ISIL, chaos. They're coming to America. They're going to bring Ebola. They're going to bring chemical warfare. They're going to bring AK-47s. They're coming to malls. They're the personification of chaos. ISIS. Think about that. ISIS. We just had the birthday of ISIS back in August. Yes, the birthday of ISIS. Which, of course, is it was in July. The birthday of ISIS, 7/17, when the Ukrainian, when Flight 17, Malaysian Flight 17 went down in Ukraine. That was the birthday of ISIS. That's what L.S.C. Taylor shared with us. And right around that time, what do we see? We see the birth of ISIS, the group. It's no coincidence. It's all out there, hidden in plain sight. You can all see it. We're all being drawn into the revelation of the mystery, the revelation of the hierarchy, the unveiling of the mystery, the revelation of the method, the externalization of the hierarchy, whatever you want to call it, we're all being drawn into it. Right? We're being drawn into this system of symbols. And in a lot of ways we have to be, because we need to know what's going on. But on the other hand, this is the spell, the global spell that's being woven around us. Chaos is a big part of it. Aquarius is chaos, ruled by Uranus and Aries. Planetary chaos. Chaos for everyone. Chaos for every single man, woman, and child. That's Aries. It's all of us. Pure manifest will, direct expression, direct deposit, Aries. And there's Uranus there. Where else do we have chaos? Well, we have chaos in Gaza. We have chaos in Israel. By the way, what's interesting here today, on the 25th, Israel has come up with a 7-year peace plan that they want to put into effect. Now, this is cohering with biblical prophecy in Daniel 9:21. 9:21, by the way, is the next big date. Actually, it's 9:21, 9:22, 9:23. It's the next big date on the pagan calendar, and of course, that is the fall equinox. So here we have on the 25th of August, the Mars-Saturn conjunction, Israel starting to concoct this 7-year peace plan. It's very, very biblical. It's fallen in line with some of these biblical prophecies. The book of Daniel. Anyway, so that's another point of chaos. What do we have in the United States? We have Ferguson. We have what's going on in the Midwest, the Heartland, St. Louis, the Arch. The Arch, by the way, is a symbol of Saturn. The St. Louis Arch is a symbol of Saturn. It's a ring of Saturn, if you haven't figured that out yet. It's exactly what it is. A Saturnian ring, a portal, a gateway to the west. You must step through the Saturnian portal to get to the west. So we have that. We have Ebola. That's another point of chaos. Ebola, what's happening in Liberia. Liberia, interestingly enough, the country that was started. Yes, it was started as a colony for the repatriation of Africa by Americans. The capital of Liberia is Monrovia, named after James Monroe, who was the president at the time. So Liberia, the center of Ebola, of course, Ebola being talked about here in the United States. So chaos. There's always the looming dread of financial chaos, the correction, the end of money. What are you going to do when the shit hits the fan? More chaos. So you see where chaos is everywhere now. It's everywhere. It is the planetary methodology. It's in play. Chaos is in play. And it's there for a reason. It does not want you. They do not want you to rest. They don't. So we have chaos in the world. Now here we have Virgo, which is chaos adverse. Virgo needs order. Virgo wants order. The new moon is crying out for order. That's what happens with our lives. I started to do a juice fast yesterday because I wanted some order in my life. Actually, I was having some challenges with some internal organs, so I wanted to cleanse out a little bit. So the Virgo New Moon is a deep-seated quest on an emotional level to achieve and rebalance order in one's life on an emotional level. There's a purification with this Virgo New Moon. And because it's conjunct the sun, obviously, it's related to all of our personalities at this point in time. We don't have to be Virgos. It's impacting all of us. So we're looking around and we're trying to figure out, well, where is the most beneficial and the most healthy way that we can express ourselves emotionally? You know, what do we need to cut out in our lives? And Virgo is related to the body, so obviously there can be food or substance-based sort of actions and goals that people are looking to implement in their lives. So that's a whole other aspect of this. It's not just emotional, but it's physical as well. The two are connected, especially with the new moon and the sun. And then we have Mercury in Virgo, and that gives us kind of yet another level of analysis to deal with all this stuff. It's almost too much in some ways. Venus in Leo says lighten up. Go out and have some fun. Spend some time around a kid. Remember where you came from. We were all kids at one point, right? Marcus Garvey, that was the name I was looking for in my head. Is anybody else out there having a challenging time remembering things? I am having an interesting time trying to resurrect information, which doesn't really bode well for a radio host, especially somebody like me. So Marcus Garvey was the guy that led the repatriation movement to, of course, Liberia. Liberia is on the west coast of Africa, right? And that's where you have Ebola. Venus in Leo, 16 degrees. It has moved past Jupiter fairly quickly. But they're still conjunct. It's a 9-degree conjunction. Go out, have some fun. Meet some friends. Have a drink. Don't have too many. It doesn't sit well because the opposite of Virgo is what? Pisces. And so when we get into one sign, just because we're into one sign, that does not negate the influence and the power of the other or the sign opposite it. So when we are in the midst of Virgo, you want to make sure that you're not drinking a lot. You want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. Because the flip side is going over to the other side, which is Pisces, which would mean that you could get out of control a little bit. So moderation is the key. Go out, have some fun. Go out, have an appetizer. Go to happy hour, have an appetizer, have a drink. But make sure you go to the gym first. Mars, Saturn conjunction. It's about as tight as it's going to get. We got Saturn at 40. Mars is faster. So by the end of the day, Mars will be at 40 degrees. And we have already experienced the power of the Saturn and Mars conjunction. That happened, by the way, early Sunday morning in Northern California, where there was a very strong 6.0 earthquake, and it took place in where? It took place in Napa County, the wine country. Yep, all those caskets of wine hidden away in where? Wine cellars, right? Wine cellars. Wouldn't that be a very 8th house kind of manifestation, the wine cellar? Cavernous, dark, containing these rich red liquids, blood, wine, the blood of the sacrifice. Wine, yes. Right there, wine country, Napa, splattered all over the place. The blood of the host. That's a very kind of Saturnian, Scorpionic, Mars, hey, the Earth is going to move kind of deal. On Saturday night, I was playing around with Twitter. I've been doing a lot more Twitter lately. I'm trying to get my Twitter cume up. I actually like Twitter. I stayed away from Twitter for a long time because Twitter doesn't foster dialogues the same way Facebook does. It's a generational thing, I think, Twitter versus Facebook. And even now, Instagram versus Twitter, there's a whole other morph going on. But Twitter, you can get really live stuff happening. Like, I didn't even have to watch the baseball game last night with the A's versus the Angels because every batter was being updated by Susan Schlosser, who was at the Coliseum. Twitter is raw. It is an absolutely raw Uranian, Aquarian medium for our time. And you can get the pulse very quickly on Twitter. You can find out how people are thinking, how people are feeling. It is, in some ways, kind of like the nervous system for the world. It's very interesting. Anyway, I've been on Twitter And on Saturday night, I posted Mars-Saturn conjunction is volcanic. And sure enough, a couple hours later, we had the big earthquake in California. A few hours after that, another earthquake in South America, 7.0. Iceland has been rocking and rolling, shifting. And the volcanism in Iceland is unstable at present. Hawaii, there's a lava flow that is going beyond where it is and has gone in the past. So we're seeing the creation of new life forms in Hawaii, or new land forms in Hawaii. Life forms along shore. So we're in it right now. The volcanic shift, the tectonic sway of the Mars-Saturn conjunction. Last night with the Mars-Saturn conjunction, we had the VMAs, the Video Music Awards. MTV puts these on every year. Last year, it was Miley Cyrus. She was the big show at the VMAs. And one of the things that I broke down, this was in my newsletter that I do about once a month, maybe a little bit more. One of the things that I broke down was the Barclay Center, where the VMAs took place. And it is a total esoteric location, number one, and a completely esoteric design. If you look at the Barclay Center, it is the Eye of Horus. And there are pyramids within the Barclay Center. It's very fascinating. And then I got into the substructure of the Barclay Center, like who owns it. It's Michael, what's his name? Mikhail Prokhorov. He's one of the Russian. He is not a Jewish Russian oligarch. He is a Russian Prokhorov. Mikhail Prokhorov, I believe that's his name. He's the owner of the New Jersey Nets, so he's Russian. And there was a ton of bear symbolism during Miley Cyrus's opening number with Robin Thicke. And the bear, of course, is Russia. It represents pedophilia as well, but it's also Russia. So there's a ton of Russian symbolism going on during the VMAs last year. And I immediately interpreted that as there's going to be issues with Russia, that this was a ritual to stir up chaos with Russia. And of course it was. And of course it is. And what have we seen after that? Well, we've seen what's happening in Russia and Ukraine and that part of the world. Last night, the opening sequence of the VMAs featured a 666. That was the center stage. And there were pyramids and all-seeing eyes. I mean, they were just really out there. So this is a Mars-Saturn conjunction because Saturn, Scorpio is the sign of the occult. It's the sign of the occult. If we look at, let's just break this down a little bit. Let's look at the three water signs. Now, air signs are the sign of magic. All the air signs are the sign of magic because with air, we literally, prestidigitation. We bring something into the world that came from nothing, theoretically. That is a magical act. But water is the vehicle. If air is the mental space where magic takes place, because we view it with our eyes, right? And our eyes are connected to our brain, and our brain is connected to all the air signs. So air is the media. Air is the screen. That's the frontal projection. It's the front screen projection of magic. Water is the magical medium, or the medium through which it travels, because we have to emotionally buy into it. We have to emotionally buy into it. So when we look at the three houses, or the three water signs, there's Cancer, there's Scorpio, and then there's Pisces. With Cancer, what we have is we have sort of it's very local, right? Cancer is the home. It's kind of around you. It's like kitchen witches. That's what Cancer is. It's like nature spirits in the garden. It's all kind of very homey. It's essential oils. It's teas. These are the things that are making us feel better on some level, to feel nurtured and to feel loved, right? Or to feel connected. But it's still magical. You know, the kitchen witch is a symbol of magic, and she's in the kitchen, which is very Cancer. Essential oils, these are all like things in the home. They're vehicles. They're medium for a certain type of magic, right? Local magic, domestic magic, whatever that is. We go to Scorpio, and it shifts, becomes much different, and we're into much more of the occult, and it takes us into the underworld. It takes us into some of the possession traditions, Yoruba, Candomblé, Voodoo. These are all very 8th house, very scorpionic kinds of mediums. And then we get into the symbols and the attendant systems that go along with it. Spells, incantations, sigils. These are all very scorpionic pieces that are part of that expression of magic, or at least the medium, the emotional medium through which magic is able to travel. And then the last would be Pisces, and it's everything. It's everything that's gone before it. It's everything that I've talked about with Scorpio and also Cancer, but it's more. It's the transcendent aspect of it all. It's the aspect where we dissolve into the godhood, into the greater whole. So, you know, that's where we evoke some of the Christian imagery, which is obviously the transcendence, the transfiguration, the resurrection. All these things are very much related to Pisces, letting go of one's small will for the larger will, letting go of one's body to rejoin with the greater body, the body of Christ, or the body of God, the body of the Godhead. These are all Piscean sorts of energies that are associated with that sign and the vehicle for magic. There's a movie, which is a very interesting movie. I highly recommend it. It's called The Prestige. And it stars Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale, along with Scarlett Johansson, and also Michael Caine. And this is a Christopher Nolan movie, and these people all sort of surface again and again and again, with the exception, I think, of Scarlett Johansson. I think it might have been a one-off for her in Christopher Nolan films. And one of the interesting components of this film is water. And Hugh Jackman, his great trick takes place when he basically suspends himself in water and literally dies. I don't want to give too much of the movie away, because if you haven't seen it, there's a major spoiler in this film. I don't want to ruin it for you. But I'm bringing it up because we see here that water is literally symbolic and manifest in this whole idea of the vehicle for magic. It's like Harry Houdini. It's based on, you know, the water trick, where he tried to let himself out of that water, and he couldn't do it. He drowned to death. So it's just one way, or one kind of major cinematic symbol that exposes or externalizes water as the vehicle for magic. And then we get into fire, and fire is the buy-in. Right? Fire is the enthusiasm. Fire is the thing that gets you fired up and turned on about the event. And then there's the earth part of magic, which isn't really, earth is very pragmatic, and it doesn't really have a role in some ways in magic to some extent. Earth is too pragmatic on some level. So the main elements are really air and water for magic. But anyway, so we have what happened with the VMAs last night. If you look at the center stage, there's the 666 symbol. So what is that saying? What is that saying? What is that saying to us? If last year we were dealing with twerking and we were dealing with all the bear imagery and again the esoteric configuration of the Barclay Center, which you can look at it. There's images on the internet where you can clearly see it. And then the whole foreshadowing of Russia, which is, I think, really the more important part. What did the VMAs foreshadow about this year or the time that we're in? Clearly, it is about the externalization of the hierarchy, that we are at a new phase now. It's not going to be about what's going to happen in Russia. It's about the direct implementation of this occult technology that is taking place. Another thing, and this is a really big thing, and I've been thinking a lot about this lately with Saturn and Scorpio. You know, Saturn is, and I want to write about it, Saturn and Scorpio. Scorpio is a fairly complex sign. Remember, it is the 8th sign, as above, so below, with Scorpio, right? It is the 8th sign, and it takes us into the underworld, and it takes us into our legacy as well. The 8th house in Scorpio is directly connected to legacy. Where we came from, what we did on a collective level, not on a familial level, that would be Cancer, but on a collective level, because it is the first transpersonal sign, what we did and what will be the direct result of what we did. Now, some people may call that karma. I call it legacy. Now, what's been very interesting is since Michael Brown, by the way, Michael Brown is getting buried today on the Saturn-Mars conjunction. It is noteworthy. So one of the things that has come up and has been coming up consistently with Saturn and Scorpio is our legacy as a country as it relates to race, as it relates specifically to the dynamic between Black Americans and white Americans. And, of course, we have to go back into our legacy to explore and understand what that is and what that means. And inevitably and invariably, we will have to come to the whole notion of slavery. This is Saturn in Scorpio, because the chains of slavery are being rattled. Even a crappy film, and I'm sorry, it's a crappy film, Django Unchained. I am not a Quentin Tarantino fan. I was at one point, I'm not any longer. It did bring up this issue in this Saturn and Scorpio time frame. And now we have Mars, the powder keg Mars on top of it. It's volatile. It's angry. It's being provoked. It's provocational. Now, in order to understand slavery, and I'm not going to get into a big, long dissertation on this, but you have to understand who the players were. It's not as cut and dry as you might seem. Okay, and I am not in any way, shape, or form condoning slavery at all. Please, let's just get that on the record. I think Washington made a huge mistake after the Revolutionary War by not freeing everybody. Huge mistake. And it's come back to literally haunt us. Okay? Lafayette took Washington to task. And he said, you have got to free these people. Now, both Lafayette and Washington were Freemasons. They're both 33-degree Masons. And Lafayette took it unto himself with France. And France, by the way, never had slavery. France has a very different kind of karma around this. But the one area, they didn't have it within France, but the one area where they did have it was in Guyana. They had a colony in Guyana, and thanks to Lafayette, They ended it. Now, if you really want to get into this legacy piece, you have to understand who the players were. Plain and simple. Who were the slave traders? The slave traders lived on Rhode Island. The head slave trader was Aaron Lopez. He was from where? He was from Spain. And he was, unfortunately, I hate to say this, I'm going to bring it up, but they were a group of disenfranchised Spanish Jews who were kicked out of New York by Peter Stuyvesant, who was the governor of New York. He said, get out of here. We don't want you here. So these guys set up shop in Rhode Island, which, by the way, was the major port for ships going to Africa. Now, Washington made a deal. He made a deal with Aaron Lopez and these guys living in Rhode Island. It's on the record. It's part of the public record. He went there, talked to them, and said, look, I need money for the Revolutionary War. I need to keep this thing going. And they gave it to him under the condition that they would be free throughout any of the 13 colonies and that they would be free to practice any kind of business that they wanted to, whether it was banking, whether it was buying land, whether it was haberdashery, whether it was slavery. So what happened was that there was a deal that was made for this country. And the deal had to do with these guys living in Rhode Island. It's a whole group of people living in Rhode Island. So you have to understand the players involved that are part of this legacy because it's a big piece that is not talked about, is not shared. I got into this one time on a show last year. I talked about Monsanto, the Monsanto family. I broke it down. The Monsanto family were big slave traders down in where? Louisiana. And here we are. We're dealing with Monsanto again. They're still around. So in order for us to have a bigger dialogue, we have to really understand where the players, who the players were, where they came from. That's part of the Saturn and Scorpio piece. And once you have a greater understanding of what took place, then maybe it looks a little bit different. And again, I'm not condoning it, but we have to have a bigger understanding around it, more comprehensive. That's just the way it is. The other thing that really struck me, I'm off on a tangent a bit here, and I may be putting myself into hot water, who knows. But I was watching the Little League World Series quite a bit, and there's some great stories. I'm really thrilled that the Chicago team was there. I'm thrilled that they played in the finals. I think it's great that baseball has come back to the cities. I applaud it 100%. And I talked about this, I think, on Friday's show. Baseball is just a better sport when African Americans are part of it. It just is. Baseball is and it needs to be an inclusive sport. So having, baseball return to Chicago or Philadelphia or wherever, I think it's great. I'm glad the team was there, and I'm glad they did well. But one of the things that bothered me, and I tried to articulate this in a small post last night, and I couldn't quite get it out, was that there was such an emphasis on Chicago doing well or Monet Davis doing well that it was almost painting the African-American community and the African-American experience into this place where it was almost like they're living in Johannesburg, and this is apartheid circa 1975, and that this is a community that is so completely disenfranchised and gutted, and the poor sister of everybody else, that having a baseball team from Chicago or having a young woman who's African American show up at the Little League World Series is like this great pinnacle of achievement. And I thought to myself, that this is wrong. That this, on some level, this is wrong. Because part of the dialogue around this just needs to change. I mean, one of the things that I think, need to do is to look at everybody from a much more uplifted perspective. And that's not to deny that there are issues and challenges. There are issues and challenges for everyone. The middle class is getting decimated. Jobs are going away. You know, there's an underclass of people coming into this country, you know, that are taking jobs at a you know, root level, service-oriented jobs. You know, the Republican fat cat corporate people, they love it. It's cheap labor. They don't have to pay health care. They get away with murder on that end. The Democrats love it because it allows them to have all these social programs. They're winning both ways, by the way, on, you know, illegal immigration. But the bottom line is that they are taking jobs for people. And I'm on my little political bandwagon here, my little soapbox. So the middle class is getting decimated. You have workers coming in from India. We have outsourced technology going to places like China and Vietnam and South Korea, and so we're having fewer and fewer jobs. And now we have this whole class of robot workers coming in. Yeah, they're coming. Hello, Uranus and Aries, they're coming. I was just reading a story about how robots will be working with you in restaurants. Goodbye, busser. Goodbye, busboy. They'll be working with you in retail positions, very light touch retail positions. Robots are already deeply embedded in manufacturing and in distribution. If you go to a lot of warehouses now, they are robotically controlled. They've got robots with sensors and forklifts, and they know exactly where to go. Warehousing and distribution has cut down their workforce probably by about 25 to 30% by employing automated help. It's just the way it is. So it's not just one group that is having a challenge right now. Trust me, the challenges are much bigger. They're planetary. But that's not to say that I'm not, you know, some areas just have it harder than others, even though we're all getting hit right now. But the narrative that was being broadcast during the Little League World Series, I think was quite, in some ways, while it was helpful, while it was like, hey, you know, isn't this great? You know, look at these kids. Look at where, you know, look at where they come from, such a bad community, and so on and so on. The collective message is that, in some ways, I felt like it was rather insulting. Because if you look across the board, there are African Americans in positions of importance and power all across the country. All across the country. So in some ways, the narrative is kind of disingenuous. And it brings up some more of the social division in a lot of ways. I'm just throwing it out there because, again, this goes back to Saturn and Scorpio and the dialogue. And how do we transform it? How do we get from a place where, you know, the underlying issue is always race on some level? How do we transform that? Well, we transform by looking at it in different ways, by talking about it in different ways, by leaving old models behind, the old models of judgment, or the old models of even some form of emotional or psychological reparation. And I'm not talking about economic reparation, emotional and psychological reparation. Because I'll tell you right now, there's something bigger going on the planet, and something that transcends all of our color and all of our ethnicity and even our nationality to a large extent. There's a big, big shift and transformation, both light and dark, taking place. And when we get into these localized divisions, it takes us away from that. All hands on deck, as they say. By the way, I posted this on Facebook, and we're going to talk about this ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. By the way, most of those buckets don't have any ice in them. I mean, come on, people. If you're going to have an ice bucket challenge, can you put some damn ice in the bucket? Cold water? You're almost there. But this is, you know what this is like? This is like a baptism. This is like a baptism. This is like a baptism, a collective baptism, but it's freezing. It's cold. It hits you on your crown chakra. Right? It locks your crown chakra down. Now, that's not to say cold therapy isn't good. Peyton Manning does it every time. Every game he plays, he goes into a cold tub. Most football players do. Why? Because it stops the swelling of their muscles. It stops the inflammation. That's what happens. But we're dealing with this ice bucket challenge now, which is in some ways this very strange and frozen baptism. Anyway, the guy who started the ice bucket challenge, Corey Griffin, he died. He died on the 17th of August. How did he die? He died when he jumped off of a roof and into the water. This is in Boston. It might have been the Bay or something. At about 2 in the morning, he jumps off this roof, dives into the water. Neptune, Chiron, Poseidon, Pisces, pops up one time and we never see him again. Or when we do see him, he's no longer alive. So the founder of the Ice Bucket Challenge died. He died 7 days ago, actually 8 days ago now, due to water. Mind-blowing stuff. Strange times we're living in. I'm telling you right now. I just posted something on my Facebook page. It was a tweet. And it was a tweet by a guy by the name of the Fisher King. The Fisher King. And he said to Michael Sam, if you sack Johnny Manziel and do the money sign, I will buy drinks for the world forever. Drinks for the world forever on me. That was the tweet. It got close to 4,000 retweets. The Fisher King. And who just passed away recently? It was Robin Williams, who played the Fisher King. Of course, Michael Sam is the first openly gay player to come out of college and put himself into the NFL draft. A 7th round draft pick, if I'm not mistaken, for the Los Angeles Rams. The Los Angeles Sacrificial Rams, actually not Los Angeles anymore. Where do they play? They play in St. Louis. St. Louis Rams, where they have the arch, which is a symbol for Saturn. And what is Michael Sam? He is a Capricorn ruled by Saturn. Saturn and Scorpio, it's all interwoven, intertwined, interconnected. We are living in a time of holographic revelation. That's where we are. Holographic revelation. Powerful stuff. Saturn and Scorpio, where is your own legacy? What's going on with you, your family? I've been dealing with my family in a very big way. Saturn and Scorpio here, it's the family of man, the family of the United States. We are a family, believe it or not. We're one of the most dysfunctional families, in the world, but we are a family within the borders of this country, believe it or not. Yes, we are. So we look at our legacy, and in my family, boy, oh boy, has it been fun? No, it hasn't. It hasn't. I'll tell you that right now. But what I have learned was that the spirit of families lives on and can occupy just about anybody at any time. Let's put it that way. So, what else is happening out there with Saturn-Mars conjunction? We'll tune back in a little bit later in the show to see if there's any new developments, breaking developments. There's already a lot that's happening. Trust me. Oh, by the way, there was a shooter this morning They call it a live shooter. There was a shooter here at one of the forts, of course, in the United States. Somebody who's probably either an actor or a real person, perhaps, who went crazy because they couldn't shake their post-traumatic stress disorder from their experience out there in the war, one of the many wars going on in the world. We have Uranus in Aries at 16, and it is in an exact trine with Venus right now. I should play XTC's song, Love at First Sight. It's a great song. The explosion of amour in the midst of the deconstruction of Western civilization is happening right now as we speak. Somebody is falling in love right now. Maybe not here in this show, but somebody is falling in love. Love at first sight, Uranus trine Venus. Love affairs don't often last with the Uranus-Venus trine, but they sure as hell can be very exciting and fun as they get going. Just light the fuse and watch the skyrocket take off. Neptune is in Pisces at 6 degrees. Pluto, retrograde, of course, in Capricorn at 11. Later tonight, early tomorrow, we will have a Pluto moon trine, which should be very good for rebuilding and setting new goals for you on an emotional level, because that's what Capricorn does. It sets the standard, it sets the bar, it sets goals. And of course, Chiron at 16 degrees Pisces. True Note 20 Libra. Some birthdays today, real quick, before we take a break here in the first hour. Some birthdays very quickly. Let's just get into them. Sean Connery, it's his birthday today. Oh, speaking of Miley Cyrus, her daddy, Billy Ray, it's his birthday today as well. Virgo, Billy Ray Cyrus. Have you ever seen the pictures of Sean Connery and the Ayatollah Khomeini together? Pretty interesting. I'm not saying they're the same guy, but the resemblance is slightly uncanny to some extent. Who else? Birthdays today. One of my favorite baseball players of all time, Raleigh Fingers. He of the handlebar mustache and the Hall of Fame career as a reliever. Today, it's also the birthday of Monty Let's Make a Deal Hall, one of the great game show hosts of the 20th century. Robert Big Game Horry, who also looks a lot like somebody else, Will Smith. Put Robert Horry and Will Smith together. They look a lot alike. It's his birthday today. Today is also the birthday of Ivan the Terrible. Don't you miss nicknames like that? Ivan the Terrible, Peter the Great, Alexander the Great. We should all have our little nicknames like that. What would your nickname be? I think I'd be Robert the Verbose. That's what I would be. Van Johnson, it's his birthday today. I always liked Van Johnson as an actor. I watch a lot of old movies. Got that from my father. Who else? Let's see. Blair Underwood. It's his birthday today. Let's see who else. Tom Skerritt. Another actor. Some very good actors born today, huh? Tom Skerritt played Cowboy in Alien. He also played in MASH. He was in the film MASH. One of my favorite actors, Tom Skerritt, lives up in Washington. Likes to light the spliff every now and then. Regis Philbin. I wonder what Regis is doing these days. I wonder if I bet you Regis cannot watch the show with Michael Strahan and Kelly. Because you know he didn't want to give that up, right? He did not want to give that up. That'd be very hard. Kathy Lee Gifford went through that as well. I wonder if Kathy Lee Gifford and Regis Philbin get together and watch the show and rip on those people. Today is also the birthday of Tim Burton, the filmmaker. And I'm looking at his chart now. Not a lot of action up in the 11th house or 12th house. He has Mars in the 12th house. Very strong personality, Sun, Mercury, Pluto conjunct, all in the 4th house. And they do sextile Jupiter conjunct Neptune, and Neptune does rule film. So it's Tim Burton's birthday today, born 1958. He's a fellow member of Generation Z or Generation Zero. And of course, he also directed Batman as well. He has a son named Billy Burton. He's a Libra. Okay, why don't we take a break here? And when we come back, I'll talk about the conjunction. And I'll talk about the power of the conjunction and what it means in a chart, and how I think it's one of the most underrated aspects in all of astrology. We'll get into that. I'll do a quick update on any other kinds of Mars-Saturn conjunction action that we have here. So what do I want to play? What do I want to play? Let me go into the sounds. The sounds. What would be a good song for today? For the Mars-Saturn conjunction. Oh boy. I always get into this. I should be picking out the songs beforehand, right? Let's do a little Ari Oakland. Let's do some Wasteland. I haven't played this in a long time. Here's Ari Oakland, Wasteland. I'll be back in 5 minutes and 40 seconds. You're listening to 11th House Radio, and I am Robert Phoenix.
One of those city of ash, where everyone offends the past, and the forsaken drift aimlessly to the grave and grab the street. Walking through the wreckage as the smoke-filled horizon begins to fade. Along gutters littered with the residue of the lives washed away. I hear the subterranean moans of living dead whose ghosts walk on barren streets. Like the wealthy youth, they bend their head and hang towards their feet. And slowly trudge along. Torn corpse in desolation's garden, and I'm descending deeper in the dark. Of the Holocaust, I shout, it's not my time. With glimmers of the river and the valley below, I'm leaving the wasteland behind. Instead of despair, turn my way. And I wander through the wasteland. And
That was Ari Oakland and Wasteland. You're listening to 11th House Radio. I'm Robert Phoenix, and we were just talking about, in the chat room, talking about Sam Bradford, who got hurt on Saturday night, and he's a player for the Los Angeles Rams, the same team that Michael Sam plays for. So you have Sam and Sam, right? Sam Bradford, Michael Sam, the two Sams, duality again. Number 8, because Sam Bradford was born on the 8th of November, as above, so below. Ward number 8, 8th house Scorpio. Thank you, Astrology Revolution, for triggering this dialogue inside the chat room. Interesting stuff. And yes, Michael Sam did play at the University of Missouri, and there he is playing for the St. Louis Rams. The St. Louis Rams were almost not the St. Louis Rams. The New England Patriots, believe it or not, almost moved to St. Louis. They were a couple days away. This is when the Rams were still in Los Angeles. The New England Patriots were just days, literally weeks, days away from moving to St. Louis. And it wasn't until Victor Kiam. Well, Victor Kiam actually lost the team. The team was actually owned for a brief period of time by the state of Massachusetts. And it was bought very cheaply, I believe. No, I take that back. It wasn't Victor Kiam. There was another owner after Victor Kiam. And the current owner of the Patriots wound up buying the team and Gillette Stadium. Yeah, the current owners of the Patriots, they bought the team, and they were almost headed to St. Louis. But the Rams went there and said, Georgia Frontieri, at one point in time, she was very into astrology. She became a born-again Christian at the end of her life. Okay, it is 1:05 here, and we are just scanning and talking about the Saturn conjunction with Mars. The shooter, apparently, Robert Kraft, by the way, this is my brain, man. My brain is on slow mode these last few weeks. Robert Kraft, of course, the owner of the New England Patriots. Interesting name, Kraft, don't you think? I did a scan of the newswire. The shooter apparently is under apprehension and subdued, whatever happened there, as these shootings break out from time to time on Army bases. I guess he's near okay. And other than the Michael Brown funeral, there's not much happening, at least now. We have an entire day, and then of course a day or two after the actual conjunction of Saturn, Mars, which we already saw with the earthquake in California. It was major, absolutely major. One of the things that is something that I just want to talk about from a personal standpoint, political standpoint, and maybe this sort of gets mixed up into all this, especially with all the Neptunian energy where we're really trying to sort things out, is now apparently Obama wants to go in and bomb northern Syria and get after the ISIS crew. I don't think that that's really what's happening. I think that they have wanted to go to war with Syria for a while now, and there's some deception taking place. And they've created ISIS in order for them to actually do airstrikes against Syria, quite likely where ISIS is thought to be but is not, because Syria has done an incredible job of defending itself and fending off the onslaught of the New World Order. They want to maintain their sovereignty, whether you like Assad or not, who, by the way, is born on 9/11. Whether you like Assad or not, in some ways it doesn't matter. They want to hold on to their sovereignty. That's not the name of the game here, 21st century planet Earth. Sovereign nations are not allowed to exist. They must be eradicated and brought into the New World Order. The New World Order really is basically saying we need to get you into the World Bank. We need to get you into the IMF. Look at what's happening with Ukraine. Ukraine is close to teetering on a financial disaster. Why? Because they're at war. They're at war. Now, countries that are at war generally don't do well unless it's the United States, who manufactures all the weapons in which we sell to ourselves or other people, so we do better when there's times when we're at war. Isn't that terrible? But Ukraine, because they're engaged in this war, is losing money. And what happened once Ukraine split off? Well, they joined the IMF and the World Bank, and they needed money. They got money, big fat money from the World Bank. They got money from the United States. And now they're in debt. And they're going to need more money and more money and more money. See how it goes? And then the infrastructure is, destroyed. You've got to go in and rebuild. More money, more debt, more debt, more debt. Anyway, this is why they want to go in and start hitting northern Syria, because they have not been able to have a full frontal scale assault against Syria, so they create ISIS, and they create the impression that they're there, so they get to actually launch airstrikes against Syria now. That's how it works. Deception. Let's talk about conjunctions. Let's move to astrology. Talk about conjunctions. Conjunctions are in many ways, one of the most, I think, misunderstood and underrated aspects of the zodiac, and I'll tell you why. And I am of the mindset that is shared by Ra and the Cosmophysics crew, that I think a conjunction can be 30 degrees. Okay? I believe that once a sign is in a sign and it has contact with a planet in the same sign, then it is influencing the other planet. Now, it depends on the degree, but it is still influencing that planet. A classic conjunction, there are two schools of thought, 5 degrees and 10 degrees. 10 degrees is when we begin to talk officially about the conjunction. 5 degrees is when we really pay attention. And within 2 degrees on either side of 5 degrees is when the conjunction gets, in the minds of most mundane Western astrologers, activated. That you pay attention. Oh, this planet is having a relationship with the planet next to it. But in the big picture, they're still having a relationship even if they're further apart than 10 degrees or 5 degrees. So we have to look at the influence of one planet upon another. Now, there can also be out-of-sign conjunctions, which I'll talk about. They're rare, they do happen, but there can be out-of-sign conjunctions. You could have one sign. Let's say let's say your sun is at 1 degree Aquarius, and your Saturn is at 29 degrees Capricorn. You're going to have a Saturn-Sun conjunction. It's out of sign, but it's still a conjunction because of that 5 degree zone that we're talking about. But from 30 to 1 or 30 to 0, we have this influence of one planet to another. Now, when they get closer, of course, the influence gets more and more pronounced. The sweet spot for the conjunction is roughly between 4 to 6 degrees, where it's really generating some good, healthy, profound influence from one planet to another. So, for instance, if you have your moon conjunct Mercury and they're within that 4 to 6 degree zone, you are a person who can be instinctive, you can have really good intuition, you can be feeling, but you can marry that feeling with thought, which is what Mercury does. It's thought, it's communication, and we see that there's a nice balance between having an intuitional and a rational component within the individual. That would be somebody who is equally left brain or right brain, perhaps masculine and feminine. Oh, I can feel, I can intuit. Oh, yes, but I can also communicate and articulate. That would be the positive expression of that kind of conjunction. When we get closer with conjunctions, it gets trickier, much trickier. So let's say that the conjunction between the moon and Mercury was at 3 degrees or 2 degrees or 1 degree, what we have is somebody who can be very subjective at times in their emotionality and allow their emotions to dominate their thoughts, that they would be so caught up in the emotional experience that they could not necessarily pull back at times and see their emotional experience from an objective place. That would be the downside of a very tight conjunction between the moon and Mercury. And we can begin to play with this combination with any planet. For instance, my mother has Mercury-Mars conjunction, and they're tight. They're like two, I think it's 2 degrees between my mother's Mercury and my mother's Mars, and they're in the sign of Aries. She doesn't stop talking. When I was back east, we were driving around in a car, and I was timing her, and she was saying something every 10 seconds. It was compulsive. So when we have a Mercury-Mars conjunction, it doesn't really matter what sign it's in. Hers happens to be in Aries, which is Mercury-Mars on steroids. So it's one of these aspects where that is compulsive, because of the closeness of the conjunction. You back it off a bit, 5, 6 degrees, that Mercury-Mars person is an incredible debater. It's a quick mind. It's a problem-solving mind. It's an aggressive mind. It's a fearless kind of mind. But it's not compulsive. It's a mind that has direction. It is not beholden to Mars, which is constantly triggering Mercury and getting the person to speak. Also, with that conjunction, very touchy on a personal level. It's happened to me this weekend. Talk about, I like to use my own life for these kinds of examples. I had the Saturn-Mars conjunction. I'm dealing with family stuff. My mother was in the earthquake on Sunday. I found out about it, and I've been in California earthquakes. I'm from California, and they tend to shake, rattle, and roll, and people get over them. That's been my point of reference. Apparently, this was a lot bigger. And I've been in 5.8s. This was 6.0. I've been in 5.8s, and they rock, but then you kind of move on with your life. Well, this was a much more dramatic earthquake, especially the closer you got to Napa County. So I was going to call my mom later in the day, but I didn't call her right away. I get an email from her, and she talks about it. She talks about nobody called her, and she says, "And I won't forget it." That's what she says in her email. I won't forget it. So to me, that's Mercury-Mars conjunction. I am going to go on the offensive. Instead of showing you how vulnerable I am, I cannot do that, so I'll go on the defensive. I remember that when my father passed away, she could not get into grief. All she was able to get was anger. That's the Mercury-Mars conjunction, especially when it's super tight. Super, super tight. Let's go to the Mercury-Neptune conjunction when it's tight. Let's say it's 2 or 3 degrees Mercury-Neptune. You have somebody who cannot disassociate or distinguish layers of reality. Mercury conjunct Neptune is an inveterate liar, and they can't help themselves. They're pathologically geared towards lying. They cannot separate reality. They could tell themselves a lie to the point where they will believe the lie. They will absolutely 100% believe that lie. Now, they can be very imaginative, and let's hope that they would use that Mercury-Neptune conjunction to be a creative writer or something along those lines, because writing is lying in a lot of ways. But they would not be able to help themselves. When we get past 4 degrees, it's very difficult to separate Mercury out from anything. And it affects us. It's a big conjunction. The Mercury conjunction is big because it impacts our thinking. And our thinking, in a lot of ways, drives our being and who we are. That's just the way it is in our current society. So when we get into that conjunction, that really tight conjunction, it can be very tricky. My son has a 3-degree conjunction between his sun and Mercury. And when you get those real tight conjunctions with the sun and Mercury, we can get into learning disabilities. I've seen it. I've seen it from 4 to 3 degrees in, learning disabilities. People having a hard time focusing. People wanting to do something else with their energy, their time, their well-being, their, whoever they are. Right? That real tight conjunction with Mercury and Sun, learning disabilities. We can just go down the line, but the key with the conjunction is to look at the degree. 4 to 6 is the sweet spot. Anything in from 3 is tricky. We start to have to kind of pull things apart. Now, what's really difficult is when you get 3 or more planets that are in on a conjunction. That it can be very challenging. Now, I know some people who have a stellium, and that's what we call a stellium, 3 or more planets in the same sign. Stellium, 4 planets, 5 planets, believe it or not, in one sign, and they're conjunct. They're within maybe 4 or 5 degrees. of one another. That is, as an astrologer or somebody studying astrology, that's one of the harder aspects to work with because everything is balled up. It's like one super planet or one super sign, and it will exhibit almost supernatural tendencies in the individual, for better or worse. You'll get the absolute best and the absolute worst of the sort of this massive, configuration of planets all knotted together. And when you work with somebody who has those aspects, you literally have to go in there with an X-Acto knife and kind of like peel them apart, piece by piece by piece, and address each one of them separately, but at the same time as a whole. For the individual who has the super conjunction, right, 3 or more planets in one sign, really tight degrees, within 4 or 5 degrees of each other, there is a tendency for that individual to not be in charge of themselves at times, that they are overwhelmed by the energies of those planets. They're overwhelmed by the complexity. There can be obsessive qualities with people that have a super conjunction. Now, it can also be deeply archetypal, and they can be, depending on the planets that are involved, if one of the outer planets or even to some extent Saturn and Jupiter are engaged, they can be running energy that's not even their own, that they become an archetype in some ways. And so then it gets even trickier because now they're a nodal point for collective energy, and they've got personal planets. I know somebody who has this energy. They've got like 5 planets in Libra, and they're all tightly bound together. And Uranus is a player in this configuration. So it is for the person who has that. I would say, to the best of your ability, slow down. Practice some meditation. Because you're going to be dealing with an overwhelming force in your life with these conjunctions at various times. And the other thing, too, is when they go through a transit, all those planets are hit intensely. Like if you have, let's just say, for instance, right now, you have a bunch of planets in Libra, and they're from, say, 10 to 15 degrees, the Pluto and Libra generation, and Saturn is coming in Capricorn and squaring all those planets. That's a lot of intensity, and that's a lot of transformation, challenge, and change for one person to go through. I mean, their lives could be completely derailed with a square along those lines, or even an opposition, but really a square. Their lives can be completely derailed because of all the planets that are involved. And there could be a major deconstruction that takes place. But as a result, there could be theoretically a way for them at that crisis point with a square hitting a stellium of planets in one sign, that it would be a way in some ways to untangle and break down the stellium. So if the person is astute and they're working with an astrologer, or they have a working knowledge of astrology, that they can step back and say, oh, well, this hit my Venus, or this hit my Uranus, and this hit my Mars, and this hit my Sun, and I can see where I played a role in these things even though I wasn't aware of it. Because a lot of times when we have the superstelliums or the super conjunctions, the individual isn't even aware of what's going on. They're just not. And so they have to, when these moments in time come in, it gives them a painful and yet very powerful and profound opportunity to unlock these pieces and see them individually for what they are. And then hopefully they can reassemble them, and then the stellium now becomes a powerhouse, that the individual has some kind of self-awareness, some type of consciousness where they can put it all together and be a real force in the world. But it's one of the hardest things to deal with on an individual level when you've got that stellium of planets in one particular sign. So this is where we talk. This is why I talk about how conjunctions can be very underrated in terms of their impact on the individual in the chart. Now, the out-of-sign conjunction has its own challenges because the individual has to balance two different types of energy. So let's say the Saturn is in Capricorn and the Sun is in Aquarius. It's not too bad because Saturn and Uranus Saturn used to be the ruler of Aquarius, so they may play well together. Let's use a different one. Let's go Leo Virgo. That might be kind of interesting. Let's say the person has Mars in Leo, 29 degrees, and Sun is in Virgo at 0 degrees. Now, that would give some fire to a Virgo Sun, which they might need, right? But Virgo at 0 degrees, or even the early degrees, let's say it's 1 or 2. Let's say Mars is at 28 and Virgo's at 1 or 2. That Virgo is intent on service, right? That's what they're here to do. They're here to serve. They're here to help. They're here to work. They're here to heal, right? That's what Virgo, especially at the early degrees, that's what it's about. I will surrender my will in some ways, my individual will, for the greater will or helping others. Mars in Leo is really proud. It's a proud energy. It's like at times it can be really arrogant, Mars in Leo. False pride. It can be dynamic, it can be loving, it can be passionate, but it can also be dealing with a sense of, hey, entitlement. This is mine. And so you have timid Virgo to some extent. Hey, I'm here to help and serve and work, but at the same time they have Mars in Leo, which could make it very, very difficult to balance those energies. And yet the two would be conjunct. It would be an out-of-sign conjunction. Now, there's always an answer. There's always a key to unlock something in astrology. Even the most difficult aspects, there's a key. I learned this a long time ago. And I learned it through a movie. And it's not even an astrology movie. It's called Red Belt. And it's a movie about MMA. And there's the underlying theme of the movie is that no matter what hold you're in, there is an answer to the hold that you can get out of the hold. It's actually not it's a flawed movie, but it's not a bad movie. Red Belt. That guy Ejiofor, the actor, I always forget his first name. It's hard to pronounce anyway. But it's not a bad movie. But anyway, it's got some answers in there for astrology. And there's always a key. So the key to that tricky conjunction, out-of-sign conjunction, Mars, Leo, Virgo, Sun, early degree, would be to throw your heart and your passion into serving, to be passionate about it, to not get stuck in the potential entitlement with Mars and Leo, in the false pride of Mars and Leo, that the Virgo Sun can get impassioned about something, and also working with people in high places, tapping into the kings and queens of our society who theoretically are our servants as well. So, these are the interesting enigmas, the Zen koans of astrology when we get into the conjunctions. They're fascinating. They're absolutely fascinating. I have my own conjunction. I have a Mercury Moon conjunction, and it's close. It's tight. Over time, I have had to become less subjective in some ways, and it's been challenging, especially when you get into sort of the decryption, work. When you're looking around the world at clues and events, right? And you see something. And I learned this. I've learned this about 3 years ago. And it's when they had these guys in these crazy uniforms go up to Montana and take over the city, right? These guys went up there and they were going to run the jail in this small town in Montana, and everybody's saying, "Oh, look, these are the Albanians or the Russians or the Stanians or whoever these guys are, and they're going to start running these jails and prisons in small cities across America that don't have any money. These are going to become the new debtors' prisons. They're going to throw Americans in there because security is the new economy." And I fell for that thing hook, line, and sinker. Alex Jones went up there. There's a clue, right? Alex Jones was there. And so I learned from that. I'm like, what's really going on here? You know, how do we step back a little bit and, you know, compartmentalize some of these things? And it's actually been a good experience. So I've had to learn. And all that stuff is in my 11th house, so, you know, about being detached or more observant around it. The beauty of conjunctions on an individual level, when we get into couples and we get into, you know, synastry with a chart, the conjunctions are very powerful, very, very powerful. You get into one person's Venus conjunct another person's Pluto, look out, man. That is a very intense relationship, and it ain't going away anytime soon. It almost feels compelled to be played out. So we get into a whole other universe with conjunctions around couples. And I have a couple that I work with from time to time. They've got some amazing conjunctions in their chart in terms of synastry. Really amazing. And you can see where it gets played out in a very positive way. In fact, conjunctions get quite juicy when it comes to couples and couple work. All right, so we are talking about conjunctions, and we're talking about Saturn-Mars conjunction. Why don't you conjunct with me? Let's conjunct together. The phone number here is area code 347-308-8995. 347-308-8995 if you want to share your conjunction. Stories, tales of conjunctions. Or you want to have me look at your chart, I'd be happy to do that. We've got about 28 minutes left in the show. We generally reserve some time for that as well. So 347-308-8995 is the number. Let's do a quick scan, shall we, of the collective. What's going on with the collective? Maybe there's some newish Saturn, Mars conjunction material. To do that, I'm going to go right to Twitter, which is the collective feed. Remember AP, Associated Press, UPI? It's the Reuters. Twitter's is the Reuters for the collective soul here. It is the nerve center. So what do we have here? Anything new happening? Hashtagging. Let's see. I got into a lot of Virgo stuff over the weekend. I have new Virgo followers on Twitter. Virgo quotes. Virgos are clever, witty, and sarcastic. Okay, here we go. 600 people quarantined in Germany after West African worker collapses in a job center. There you go. How about that? There's some interesting information breaking on Twitter. Let's see. It says tomorrow is the 35th anniversary of New Amsterdam becoming New York. It's been the 50th anniversary of New Amsterdam becoming New York. New Amsterdam, by the way, was theoretically discovered by Henry Hudson on 9/11. How about that? You knew that, though. If you've seen my Gaiam shows, you knew that. What else is happening out there? Let's see. Anything else interesting? Just tapping in here. We have the methane plumes. They are now erupting along the East Coast. That's some Saturn-Mars conjunction experience, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. What else do we have here? Nothing happening with Yellowstone. Keep your eye on Yellowstone, by the way, over the next couple of days. So that's the latest from Twitter. We've got an Ebola quarantine, 600 people in Germany. methane plumes are acting up. And what else? Oh yeah, we got the 666 stage thing. That's popping now on Twitter. And there's some ISIS material popping on Twitter. So there you go. Let's go back to the studio. We got a caller here. Hello there. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Robert. This is Patty in Vegas.
Patty, what's going on?
I just am so enjoying your show today. Oh my God, I'm going to have to play it back 50 times. And I'm painting a picture. I'm painting water as you're talking about all this water stuff. So it's perfect. But I wanted to ask you about, you were talking about the sixth house, or you were talking about these stelliums and conjunctions, and I know I have a ton of stuff in the sixth house.
Mm-hmm.
So
I have your chart here. Let me just look at it. That way we can be on the same page. So, okay. Getting there, slowly, surely. And going through my chart selection. I knew you're here because I would not have moved you. Okay. Hold on. Where are you? Okay, for the sake of good radio, you tell me about your stellium in the sixth house.
Oh boy, now I have to do it from memory because okay, so I have my sun 26 degrees of Virgo. I have Mercury 8 degrees of Virgo. What else do I have in? And then moving over to Libra, I have 18 degrees Neptune, 4 degrees Saturn. I'm not a liar, Robert. I'm the most ridiculously honest person in the world.
I've got your chart here now.
I'm like ridiculously unliarish.
Hold on a sec. All right, so when you look at, okay, so your Neptune is in the seventh house, so it is not, and it is not anywhere near your Mercury. The closest conjunction you have is between Venus and Mercury, and that is it's a 3-degree separation, Mercury at 5 and Venus at 2. Now you do have that out of sign conjunction between Saturn and your Sun, which is interesting because it's Saturn is exalted in Libra, and then you have your Sun in Virgo. I actually think that's a very nice conjunction, to be honest with you, because Saturn is out there in front. It's very professional. It's courteous in Libra. It makes contacts. It's on the cusp of your seventh house. Relationships are important. Libra has a bit of the social butterfly in it, but Virgo is all about details and following up. So you have the ability to follow up. You're sober, you're serious, you're diligent, you're professional. That's a nice conjunction. I like the out of sign conjunction with that. The Sun is in service to Saturn at that point. So you deal with beauty and so Saturn is all about beauty in the case of your chart and your life. It's also not just about beauty, but it's about longevity and cultivating beauty and grace, for longer and sustained periods of time. And the Sun is in Virgo, so it's about health also as well. How does health play a role in that? I like that conjunction. It's a good conjunction. Now, the other conjunction, which is the 3-degree conjunction with Mercury and Venus, that can be a little tricky. And part of the Mercury-Venus conjunction can be gossipy, and it may not necessarily be you, although you can't, theoretically there could be a gossipy element with that. It could also be other people, and it could be idle sort of chit chat between two people, but it can turn into something different. On one
I
level,
hate gossip.
well, so the Mercury, well, that's because you have it in Virgo, right? And so you would not want to necessarily be gossipy per se, but being in the beauty industry or the health industry / that you're dealing with people, right? And you're dealing with what people share with you. You're dealing with chit chat, and some of it may not necessarily be to your liking because of the Virgo, right? It's like, does this really affect me? This is cliche. This is extraneous. This is fluff. I don't have time for this. Because the Virgo Mercury-Venus conjunction in Virgo is all about like what's real. Sometimes a Mercury-Venus conjunction in Virgo can be very critical as well. And your Mercury is ahead of Venus, so it would be along the lines of speaking first before understanding the ramifications of how it would impact the relationship or connection with another person, because Mercury's ahead of Virgo here, or Mercury's ahead of Venus here. So Mercury is ruling the conjunction in some ways. So it's speak first and then figure out how it impacts others. So on one level, Mercury conjunct Venus in the 6th house can be very good at diagnoses. It can be very analytical. It can kind of cut through things and say, well, this is what's wrong, this is what's wrong, this is what's wrong, and this is how it could be helpful. And the Mercury-Venus conjunction can help you create a language, hopefully, where you can share that with people where they will not be offended. So it's a way to be critical without being critical. That would be a very workable side of the conjunction. Like, I'm going to share with you some very touchy information, but I'm going to share it with you in a way where I intuitively understand it's going to be touchy. So I'm going to do it in a way that is hopefully going to be helpful and not hurtful. Because Venus-Mercury conjunction does that. It tries to find a way to balance out the information or how to share so that it's not necessarily confrontational. But when it's in Virgo, you're always going to get that kind of critical edge to some degree. So it's a little bit more challenging in Virgo. But nonetheless, the effort is still there. So in a perfect world, right, you would plug that into service, and you would say, I'm here to help you, I'm here to diagnose, I'm here to analyze, I'm here to break down, and at the same time, I'm going to do it in a way where we are building a relationship together. I'm making a relationship between what it is I'm seeing or what it is I'm about to tell you about and how it will make you better or how it will bring you something that will be of value and service to your life. I'm going to build the relationship between the two things I am about to share. So it's kind of a holistic connection in some ways. The only challenge with that, because it's heavily weighted, Virgo 6th house, is that you may feel at times that you are sharing out of a place of healing where other people may not be ready to hear that. So
that's so funny. That's so true.
The caveat with this would be, I have something to share with you. Would you like to hear it? And at that point, you have a contractual agreement between two people if they say yes. Now you can share pretty much whatever you want without them feeling like, well, they just completely undressed every single flaw I have, even though they were well-meaning. Now there's agreement. So that's the way to build the relationship between you and that person and what you're about to share with them. And if they say no, then you don't. And I've actually had people who've asked that of me, do you want to hear what I have to say? And I've said no. And they've shared it anyway, and it didn't go well. So, that's something that I would incorporate with the Mercury-Venus conjunction. You're here to help. You're here to serve. but Mercury gets ahead of Venus a little bit. Now, the other thing, but it's a nice separation, right? I mean, your Mercury's at 8, your Venus is at 4 or 2, so it's 4 degrees. You have a nice cushion. If Venus was at 5 degrees, 5 degrees or 6 degrees, there would almost be like a busybody effect in there, and you would always be tinkering. You'd always be tinkering with people and their relationships, but you're not. You've got a nice 4. You're right at that edge. So you would also have an intuitive understanding about relationships as well, healthy ones, unhealthy ones, and you would have. Okay, here is the irony of your chart. You would be better at it in their lives than you would in your own.
Oh boy. So one thing I'm gathering from this is that I can be, when you said diagnostic, I can be solution oriented in a way that I can quickly jump to a solution. Would you say that is part of that?
I would say yes, because that's what Virgo wants. Virgo wants answers. They want to solve things. That's what Virgo wants to do. Here, I have an answer. If you go into a classroom and a teacher asks questions, like if you go from 1st to 4th grade, and a teacher asks questions and asks the class for an answer, I would guarantee you at least two of those hands that are raised are Virgo or Virgo rising, or have Mercury in Virgo, because they have answers. They want to provide answers. They want to provide a solution to the seeming sort of diaphanous and, fluid and anything goes subjectivity of Pisces. So yeah, you have that ability to do that. And because Virgo's in its own house here, very strong, that's what you do. But you have to do it in a way that takes into account sort of the relationship between you and the person that you're doing that with. Because that's where that conjunction comes into play. And you can do it. You can absolutely do it. And with that sextile with Uranus in your chart, you can come up with the answers very quickly. Very quickly. So, your diagnostic skills are highly attuned.
Okay, thank you so much, Robert. That's great info. Fantastic.
Well, thank you for calling in, because I needed a caller.
Virgo's also the helper.
That's right.
I wanted to give you some support.
My son, so you jumped right in there. Thank you for that.
Okay, have a blessed week, and that's it. Good luck to your son and you and everything.
Okay, and you'll be in touch, right?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, good.
Bye-bye.
Take care, Patty. Good talking with you.
Good talking with you.
That's our friend Patty from Las Vegas. Las Vegas, where the Little League team, Mountain Ridge Little League team, was from, and they lost to Chicago on Saturday. That was a strange game, let me tell you. Very strange game. Life is weird. Life is very weird. I had an experience. During the summer, we get into these distinctions in our society and our culture because that's where we are. It would be great if we could get beyond them. It'd be wonderful. But the Las Vegas team, almost all white, all Caucasian. Chicago team, all black. So we had this duality thing going on Saturday. And what's really interesting is that Chicago's a mobster town. And Las Vegas was basically built by mobsters, so they're kind of connected. And Las Vegas lost for a number of reasons. But it brought up an experience for me that happened earlier this summer. And we have my son's team, almost all Caucasian players. We had a couple of players on our team that were Latino, mixed, mothers, so on, but mostly Caucasian. And we played a team from Houston who were pretty much all black, and they had one player on their team who was Hispanic. And it was actually kind of an amazing experience playing that team. It was kind of like a Vegas Chicago thing in its own little weird way. And I remember we had won 2 games in a row prior to that game, and I remember going up against that team and just watching them, and I could, in a weird way, I could feel the ancestors on that team. It was a trip. You know, I was feeling into the energies around that team, and it was very powerful. It was quite powerful, and I knew we weren't going to win the game. I just knew it. I knew we weren't going to win that game, and we didn't. And we were playing well at that time, and you know, for whatever reason, there was a lot of weirdness in that game, and I just knew we weren't going to win. But there was very strong ancestral energy, and I think some of that was being in some ways played out in the Chicago team. But then they ran into the North Korean team, which was a very different sort of team. It was a different template. It was a different archetype, a whole different set of energies. And it was a very good team, very, very good team. And they won the Little League World Series. But that was interesting when we played that team from Houston. They were called the Monarchs, like the monarch butterfly, right? So anyway, hats off to Jackie Robinson West for getting as far as they did, and I am hoping that Little League Baseball gets back into the inner cities. It's a good sport, even though it's a totally Freemasonic sport. If you look at the field from Williamsport, you can actually see the compass in the square where baseball comes into play. You can actually see that. You can see from the field because the way that the stands are set up. By the way, all baseball stadiums, they all face east. They all face east. No matter what baseball stadium you're in, they all face east. Isn't that interesting? They're all lined in the same direction on a professional level. I can't speak for like other rules. All the major league stadiums, they all face east. Go figure. But if you look at the actual stadium itself, you can find this online. You can see the left field line where the stands are, and then it goes down to the right field line, and that is the square part. And then the compass comes in with the actual diamond itself. So if you were to draw a line from second base to third base, right, that would be the compass, and it would extend past the right field and the left field grandstands. You would see the compass in the square. It's a Freemasonic sport. Speaking of Freemasonic, I got to share this on a sports level. In the NFL, in the preseason, kickers are doing extra points from the 33-yard line. Now, 33-yard line, is that, I ask you, is that a random number? It is not. It is not a random number. It wasn't the 30-yard line. It wasn't the 25-yard line. It wasn't the 32-yard line. It's the 33-yard line. Interesting, eh? I think so. I've been having some talk with Mark Matheny, who is a Facebook pal and also another astrologer, and he is also a fantasy football geek like me. And I think we're going to do a astrology fantasy football show. It won't be here on Mondays. It'll be separated out. Maybe it'll be on a Wednesday or something. So we're going to do one show. We're going to see how it goes. Maybe we'll try to set something up for next week because we go into the season the following week. And maybe we'll see if we can do this on a weekly basis and look at planets and trends and fantasy football. That might be fun. So if you're into astrology and you're into sports, you may want to tune into that. We have to work out the details. All righty, I think we have come to the end of the line. The Cosmic Express is pulling back into the station. I'll be back on Friday, and I think I'm going to have E. Michael Jones on the show. He's already agreed to be on the show. I got to send him an email today. And he is a big brain, and he's got big balls. He's got balls of steel. And we're going to talk about what's happening in Ukraine as it relates to the neocon and Zionist agenda. It may not make some people feel very comfortable, but we're going to look at it. He is the author of a magazine called Culture Wars, and he has a website, and we're going to get him on the show. We're going to untangle, or do our best to untangle what's happening in Ukraine, who's behind it, and what the big plan for the rest of the world is. So there you go. Friday being E. Michael Jones. Cross your fingers. All right, you know the drill, you know the assignment. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay open to what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix, and you are you. You've been listening to the 11th House Radio. Follow me at robertphoenix.com, and I'm over at Facebook under Robert Phoenix and Robert Phoenix Dude Max on Twitter, which I'm now posting more on Twitter. That's it. Here's Phil K. Dick. I'll see you all on Friday.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.